Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our Facebook Live. It's so great to see so many of you in our audience at different time zones around the world. I know today we have a speaker from Australia, and I see a lot of our viewers from all over the world. We have Christine from North Carolina, Eva from the Czech Republic. We have, Mandy from New Zealand. A lot of viewers from all over. So thank you all for joining us today. We have a very exciting session. We'll be talking about researching your Jewish family history. So I see some comments in the audience about users who would like to find out more about their Jewish family history. We have Sherry who says, I would love to find more if I have Jewish family history. So this is the location. This is the Facebook Live, where hopefully we will delve into it and you can learn more about whether you have Jewish family history, if you already know that you have Jewish family history, how you can research that further on MyHeritage, and some excellent hints and tips for researching that and advancing your family history research. So you've come to the right place. Welcome, everyone, for those that are just coming in now. And please do let us know where you're joining us from today. It might be very early in the morning from where you're tuning in from, or it could be late in the afternoon. So let us know where you're joining us from. We have a great session lined up for you. We will also be giving away a giveaway today. For today's session, we'll be giving away a MyHeritage Complete Plan. So for those of you who are new to MyHeritage, the MyHeritage Complete Plan is the best plan that we have to offer at MyHeritage. It gives you unlimited access to over 13 billion historical records. Some of those records we'll be talking about today. In addition, it gives you unlimited access to all of our photo tools at MyHeritage. That's MyHeritage in color, our colorization tool, the MyHeritage Photo Enhancer, Deep Nostalgia, which is a new recent feature that we've released, which allows you to animate faces in family photos. And the Complete Plan also gives you unlimited family tree size, as well as many, many other features. So one lucky winner will win a MyHeritage Complete Plan today. So in order to enter, just let us know, we're going to be talking about Jewish family history today. Let us know how MyHeritage has helped you with your Jewish family history. Did you discover something in your DNA through a MyHeritage DNA test? Did you discover Jewish relatives that maybe you didn't know about? Let us know in the comment section, and we will choose one lucky winner at the end of today's session to win the prize. In addition, please feel free throughout today's session to put questions and comments in the comments section, and we hope to hear from all of you today. So before we get into the session, I'm going to introduce both of our speakers that we have with us today. So firstly, we have Daniel Horowitz, who is our expert genealogist here at MyHeritage. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Esther. How are you? Always a pleasure to be here with you again.
Thank you so much. I'm doing well, and we are so happy to have you on our Facebook Lives, of course.
It's always a pleasure, especially with this kind of important subject for me, as I do my personal Jewish research almost every day. My work allows me to do that. And I also have a few tips and tricks for the people out there who are starting with their genealogy research.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to bring Eli on as well, and then we'll get to today's session. I'm going to bring on Eli Ravenowitz. He's our second speaker that we have today. Hello, Eli. For those of you who don't know Eli, he was born in Cape Town. He's lived in Perth, Australia since 1986. He's a filmmaker who researches family and Jewish cultural history. He travels extensively and writes about Jewish life and travel on his website, which we will put in the comments section for everyone to take a look. And Eli, you can tell everyone a little bit more about your connection to family history.
Well, I want to talk about my connection to Daniel, because many years ago, we met in Ranana, a good South Africa. They call it the capital of South Africa in Israel, correct? It's not really Israel. And we met there, and Daniel helped with one of the talks. And it was the start of a good relationship. And we bump each other mostly in places like at IIJGS conferences in America or Europe or Israel. So it's nice to work with Daniel again. So, but personally,
pleasure is all mine, Eli.
Sorry?
The pleasure is all mine.
Yes. And I'm supposed to be talking about myself, not about you, but we're all connected. That's the important thing. And that's what I enjoy doing, is connecting with people.
Fantastic. So Eli, I know you'll come speak in a little bit, and we'll just bring up Daniel. So we'll see you again soon. And I think for now, Daniel's going to bring up his screen and share it with us.
Yes, Esther, indeed, because as I said, I have the opportunity to do a lot of research, Jewish research. And the first place that I always start is at the MyHeritage search engine, which is what I brought right now here. And totally on purpose, I am even not logged in, because I want to show you that what you can do not only for free, but even without being logged in as a member of MyHeritage. You will need eventually to subscribe and to register with MyHeritage. So in the search engine, if you go a little bit below the search form, you will see the latest collections that we have added recently. And I want to point out, and I know it's going to come later on in the conversation as well, that MyHeritage did a partnership with Litvaksig, which is the Lithuanian Jewish research group. And now we have about 4 million of Lithuanian Jewish records, and you can see them right there. But also, we have released Austrian-Hungary World War I casualty list, and of course you will find over there Jewish people, but also the Austria, or more specifically Vienna, Jewish vital records. And you know, MyHeritage is a global company. We try always to bring records from all over the world, but as I said, we have also what I called our Jewish heart, and we're always trying to bring more and more records to the Jewish world. So what I do is I come here to the view all, and you will find here a link, and this will bring me to the collection catalog, because obviously MyHeritage is releasing collections in a weekly basis. So I already saw the latest ones, but MyHeritage has many, many other collections. Unfortunately, and I am pretty sure our content team is always hearing me, not always taking me into consideration, but they hear me. And it seems that it's very difficult to have a one URL for all the Jewish records, because they are not relying only on a local place or a specific place in the world. You will have Jewish records from all over. So here is probably the best tip that I can give you to find Jewish records on MyHeritage. On the top right side of the screen, you will find a search bar where you can put any word. I'm going to use a 3-letter word, and I know that a 4-letter word will be a bad word, so I'm only using 3 letters, Jew, G-A-W. And this will actually bring the list of all the collections that MyHeritage has, not only with the word Jew or Jewish in the title, but also if the description of the collection includes that name or that word, then you can be sure that the collection has Jewish records. And I do know that some people get a little bit scared when they see some church records, or at least the title of the record will be church records for some countries. But trust me and trust MyHeritage, because inside those church records, we have detected that they are also Jewish people mentioned. The reason for this is because churches had to keep up the records of the country or the city of the place, and a lot of Jews had to register with the church in order to complain with whatever law was in the country. So just go into the collection catalog and search for the Jew word, and then find out all the collections that we have. You can, of course, filter those collections, or go drill down more by category, by countries, by years, depending on what your research will guide you. Another another website that I must mention is Jewish Gen, and Jewish Gen is also a very good place to start your genealogy research, because there are a lot of volunteers that come here and give them their data and their time here. Now, one of the most used tools in my case is actually not to research the data that they have, but to find the ancestral towns, because everyone may have heard and may have recorded the towns and the cities with their own pronunciation. And here I will be able to search and to find the exact location of my ancestral town, and then I will be sure to go back to the catalog and find out according to the country where I am looking for. In my case, most of my people are actually from Ukraine, but you have Germany, you have Czechia, you have Belarus, Austria, and many, many more collections are coming to MyHeritage very soon. So here you have, those are my suggestions. Also, before I pass to Esther and to Ellie, you need to take in account that the MyHeritage DNA section will give you 5 different ethnicities for the Jewish DNA. Most of the companies out there will talk about Ashkenazi and Sephardic, but MyHeritage also will identify if you are from the Yemenite origins, from the Middle East origins, or from the Ethiopian origin. So definitely MyHeritage is also, in the DNA world, the place to either take a DNA test or upload your DNA from any other company and get better results, accurate results, and more matches for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Daniel. And we'll just bring on Eli now, and he'll talk to us about his story and more hints and tips. And then we'll bring you back as well, Daniel, and we'll open up for questions.
I will be here hearing Eli's stories for sure. I know him. He's a very good friend and storyteller as well.
Great. Okay, so
all we have to do is you've got to navigate me to the right button. So I'm going to press 1 and we'll give it a go. Oh, okay. There we go. First time lucky. So I just wanted to show you that this was my first entree into the world of family history or genealogy. And on my father's side. And this was something that you see there is the start of something, I would say, quite profound, because since that was 1992, but since 2010, 2011, I've combined my interest with a lot of travel. Now, I live in Perth, Australia. I used to live in South Africa. I live excuse the expression, in the arse end of the world. It's not easy to get anywhere from here. And but when one communicates on the internet with people, and this is the trick is to be visible. The trick is to ask people, no matter who they are, for advice, for help. And you know what? The people in the world of Jewish genealogy are very helpful and very pleasant, mostly. So I would suggest that's what you do. So you can ask me. So obviously, Esther will send you some details where you can get hold of me eventually. Now, I need to get to the next screen. We're not going to even worry about the names there. That's fine. So to get to the next screen, I'm going to go. Please help me out. This is correct. And I've got to go and share something else. I've got to close this one. I'm just talking aloud. And press this screen here. No, that's not right. Can you help me out there? I just want to close this one. I want to go back to there. There we go. I'm getting it.
Okay.
And
Let's see.
yes, Chrome tab. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go to this one. So what we have here is a blog that Esther wrote on my direction. So it was a combined effort. And often in the world of genealogy, that's what works very well, is collaborating with people. So this is a story. Now, what I'm going to say to you is I'm not going to read out the whole story. I just want to share some aspects about it so that you can get an idea of what you can create out of what you think is just a throwaway line by an aunt, okay? So the other thing I want to say here right now is that I've used Colorize quite nicely. I think this was obviously a black and white photograph, I think from sometime in the early 30s. And it comes to life when you see it in color. So what I'm just going to talk about just is the outline of the story is that I had a great uncle, who's this gentleman here on the left, Uncle Moshe, who I'm named for. And he came out from Poland to South Africa following his older brother, Nachum Mendel, okay, who was my Zayda, my grandfather. And he then brought out a lady, a fiancée, to South Africa from Poland. Now, the town in Poland is called Orla. It's a one-horse town. You probably won't find it because there are about 3 towns called Orla. But Orla is near a very big Jewish center called Białystok or Białystok. And Białystok is in the northeast of the country. And in actual fact, it's a Litvak town in many respects. So we were talking earlier on about Litvaks. 95% of South African Jews were Litvaks. So they came, even if they came from parts of Poland, but they didn't come from southeast Poland, they came from the north. And then a lot came from Lithuania, and then some from the southern regions of Latvia. So a place like Daugavpils is where my mother came from. Today it's called that, but it used to be called Dvinsk. Okay. So this gentleman, Uncle Moshe, okay, single man, comes out, joins his brother, who's a reverend in a country town, and he brings out a fiancée who he's going to marry. Okay. And the sad story is that he gets killed in, we were told, a motorcycle accident. Now, you're talking about a date we don't even know. And the thing is that what was really strange about this was that my aunt in Israel, who knew parts of the story, had told me that she forbade her children from riding motorcycles because he was riding a motorcycle when he got killed. That's what she was told. In any case, it wasn't really the story, but she did give me a photograph. And this photograph is this particular one here, which is a school photograph from 1921, I think 1920. And it says Orla Folk School number 2, class 2. And it was written in Yiddish. And that was the class in this town of Orla, and obviously Jewish students. And you can see a couple of teachers, older gentlemen there. And that's my great uncle, Uncle Moshe. So he came from this town, okay? My aunt in Israel gave me the photograph, and she said, I have a feeling you're going to do something with this photo. So what I did was I sent it to a Polish acquaintance of mine who connected with me on Jewish Gen, and I said to him, do you know anything about this photo? And he said, well, it says Orla. And he, about a month or two later, he sends me an email and he says, would you believe it? But I found this photo that somebody's just sent me, and it certainly looks like the same school. So if you look at that gentleman who looks like the principal or the head teacher, and then you see this gentleman there, who is my great uncle there in the photograph. So I said, well, where did you get the photograph? He said, a lady in London's doing research on, she doesn't know specifically what, but some family came from this town, and she knew nothing about the photos. She just had a photo that was handed down. And he said, well, this photo matches what I've sent to him. And of course, the match was my great uncle, Moshe. So the woman in London writes to him, her name is Mary, and she says, but hold on a second, my aunt was engaged to Moshe, and he got killed in South Africa. So that's her, Paula. And so she was left high and dry in South Africa. He got killed. And but she said that married somebody else from England, had a child, and the child, who's a woman in her then 60s or 70s, lives in Freiburg in Germany. In any case, I wrote to the lady in Germany, and her name is Ray, or was Ray, and she then started sending me a whole bunch of photographs. So the story is something that we'd like you to read at some other stage. Ray Hengi is the lady's name, and we just made a beautiful contact. And eventually, the following year, my wife and I and Ray and her husband went up to Poland to visit the shtetl called Orla, as I said, near Białystok, but also in that region is Treblinka. So this is the memorial at Treblinka, and there's the name Orla, the town name, which is represented in a slab or a stone, and there are many, if anyone's been to Treblinka, it was an extermination camp. In other words, nobody stayed in Treblinka, you were there, and virtually, they say about 2 hours later, you weren't there anymore. Okay, so a very sad place. But we decided to take that photograph. It brought us together, and we went up to the little town of Orla. And what Ray also showed me was an engagement ring that my great uncle Moshe gave to her aunt, Paula. And that was that ring. So you can see there are artifacts in this, and it's like we're not related. We could have been related, but it never happened. Very sad. So what I decided to do was to find out more information. I contacted the archives in Cape Town, and what I found was an article, this one, Salt River is a suburb of Cape Town, and it describes the accident, and it says a young Jewish teacher of Hebrew. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it mentions a few things. One of the things it mentions, he was a passenger in a motor car driven by Mr. Katz. So like the story's changed now from being in a motorcycle accident to being a passenger in a car. And so I took various advice. There's Moshe, okay. And I then was able to find more information from the archives, from newspapers, and that was the story, okay. Now the story was, who was driving the car? We're told in that article was Mr. Katz. Okay. Do we know anyone who belongs to Mr. Katz? And do we know the real story? So I go into the follow-up article now. Let's just try and get this right. We're going to close. Which one we're going to close? This one. And we're going to go to, I think that's the next page. Yeah. Okay. So there's a picture of Mr. Katz. How did I find this? Thanks to Jeannie, because
we don't see the screen anymore.
Okay, I've got to go back to this. Got to work this one out. Thank you. Screen. Okay.
Let's see if we can get it going now.
I'm going to get it right. And it is, what was it? Fine. It was a tragic romance. I think that was the one. Share. Okay, you can see it now?
Yes, great.
Good. Okay. I'm going to be a champ by the end of this. Excuse me, I'm just having a quick drop of water. So the story about this Mr. Katz was quite interesting because the one of the biggest things that you can do and can be successful with is like post like crazy. Don't become a pain, but post on Genie, post on Jewish Gen, post on Network Sig, whatever is pertinent to your story, correct? And there are lots of others. There's SA Sig, South African Sig. And the other thing is that you can use things like I do WordPress. I've got 800 WordPress blogs. So, you know, people see what I'm doing. And the thing is to be visible. This is what I'm saying. And so Mr. Katz was the driver of the car. We know from that newspaper article, but we didn't know where he was, except that somebody saw the Genie post, and it turns out it's his grandson in Sydney. Okay. And the amazing thing is that so there's that article again. So when I spoke to various people, I'm not shy to ask people for advice because I can give advice, but people will give me lots of better advice. And so we move along. And the late Professor Colin Tatz gave me some good advice. Vernon Katz in Sydney, we had coffee and they said, why don't you do this? There's Anne Ravenowitz, who's from America, not related to me, gave me other advice. Any case, and Ivan Kapelis, these are some big names in genealogy that you may know. But what was so interesting about this was that it came out from the grandson that there was his grandfather who was driving a car and he was responsible for somebody's death. Well, he didn't put it that way. He just said he was the driver of a car, picked up a hitchhiker, etc. So this has moved away from this motorcycle accident. So I went to the archives in Cape Town. I go back to South Africa every year to visit family, or I write. And the archives in Rowland Street I found the record of proceedings of criminal session July 1931, because I didn't even know when the date was, right? Rex versus Leo Katz, charged with culpable homicide. And it's a very bittersweet story here, because while we found out what the essence of the accident was, we found out that Mr. Katz was driving from a suburb called Sea Point to where he was living in the southern suburbs. He saw a hitchhiker at midnight. It was rainy. He picked up this guy, gave him a lift. He didn't know him. He knew he was Jewish because they had a quick conversation. That quick conversation, I think it was, I'm just trying to remember, I think it was about 4 kilometers down the road, and they had this accident. And unfortunately, my great uncle was killed. And I'll show you the amazing thing from the archives of the Western Cape was that the court case, so these are the court documents, gives exactly what happened, and a bus was involved. Various people gave their evidence, and the sad thing is I'm scrolling through it, but you're welcome to read it. So we'll send you the link. So these are more detailed documents, and then the judge sentenced him to. He said he was driving recklessly at 35 to 40 miles per hour on a rainy night, and that was regarded as reckless. He didn't give him a jail sentence, but he was fined £40 and he was suspended from driving for about a year. Okay. And here's the story. So I've written that down to summarize what actually happened. And here it says, from the time that Morris or Moshe, okay, was picked up until his death was at most 10 minutes. Okay. So this is just an amazing story of two people who came together. And this resulted from a photograph of a school of young kids, and he was a teacher in that class. And here you get the truth. There we go. £40 sterling. Lost his driver's license for a year, and Morris was dead, and his fiancée was left high and dry just before their wedding. Okay, and they even in the court documents they even had photographs of the car. You can see there was a bit of a wreck. And yeah, he was killed. And so I will say that I did meet the grandson in Sydney, Brian Feisinger, and he said that his grandfather, who had lived in Canada, and he was such a gentle man, and he obviously bore this for the rest of his life. So there's the two people. Mr. Katz and Moshe Ravenowitz. And there's more, I worked out how far, where he got picked up and to where the accident was. And and there's just some little tidbits about what was around in that part of Cape Town. And here's the Genie post. Brian Leslie Fasinger has replied to a message in your inbox. Leo is my grandfather, my mother's father. So it was very, very interesting. I've obviously made it pretty short in terms of what actually happened, but the research in doing that was trying to connect with people, leave no stone unturned. And people were very, very helpful. Excuse me, I just have a dry throat. And so the story is very much about what has happened there that we don't know, we don't see. A lot of research. I traveled, I met parts of the family in Canada. Other people gave me photographs. I met a journalist grandniece in America. So there's been a very big interest in solving these kind of issues. So if we just close this one, okay. Now the other two I'm just going to show you, not in detail, but and this you can't see, correct? So we've got to go back to screen, and we go back to tab, and okay. So what I just want to show you is that MyHeritage did the story, okay. But if you go to Avotenu, which is a well-respected publication in Jewish genealogy, run by Adam Brown, you will find far more detail. And there's a picture of the ring. There's a picture of us outside Orla. A more detailed vision of the ring. I even did, to try and work out his Yortzeit date. I did you can get a Yortzeit calendar on an iPhone, taking a picture of finding the Matseva, the tombstone in the cemetery in Cape Town. Then finding other articles, finding a death notice. There's the original article on the left there. I went to the spot in current Cape Town and took pictures from different angles. And then I found a picture of Moshe. It's small here, but I think he's circled somewhere there. He's somewhere there. I think that's him there. Him in society. And then these are people that I met in New York and in Canada and in Israel. Family of Paula's. And she remained in contact with my Bob and my Zayda. So she became, although she got married to somebody else, she stayed part of their lives. You can imagine the trauma that this young lady went through coming out to Africa and her fiance getting killed in a car accident. And these are some of the pictures Rose Kamnitzer had in her collection. And that's the other very important trick, is to ask people if they got photos. Unfortunately, a lot of people have photos and they don't know what they are. But so many times we find that photos are there in the collections and they get identified. And so, it's just something that I think is very important. And I think the last slide I want to show you quickly is this one. And I've got to go to that. I've got to go to screen. Okay. And so I just learned this program this afternoon, so I'm doing well. Share. See, I don't even need any tuition anymore. And then that's a story about finding Mr. Katz, finding the Matsevot in the Cape Town cemetery, where we went to look for Uncle Moshe's tombstone. It was a very dangerous area of Cape Town, an old cemetery that was frequented by vagrants. And so I had to take somebody with me to make sure that we didn't get attacked. So that's just more of the story. So I think, in terms of, this is only one story in my life of working. Do we want to just see everybody, whoever's there? This is just one of the stories. I'm very fortunate that I do have a good yichus, a heritage back to the Katzenellenbogen family. So anyone who knows The Unbroken Chain, it's a very important book to try and connect to the genealogy of many places, because these people who were very religious were Af Beth Dins, head of the Beth Din in all kinds of places, in France, in Italy, obviously in Poland and in Germany, but this is from like the 1400s. So I always say that people should really try hard to connect, because if you do connect, you can be unlucky, but if you keep trying, you will find some other kind of connection that you'll hang on to, and you'll say, oh, that's good, it's my fifth cousin, whatever. That's great. I'm just fortunate that I have a closer relationship because of my family being mostly religious and mostly coming through, excuse me, from a line of people who were pretty connected. So just one last example, at the time of Yom HaZikaron, which is the day before Yom HaAtzmaut, in Israel, they announce, or not announce, they call out the first victims of terror in the modern day Israel, or Eretz Israel, okay, because it was before Israel as well. And the name that is at the top of the list, the first name that's announced, is Avram Shlomo Zalman Tzoref. And Tzoref is actually a goldsmith, but he was a Litvak who came from Kaidan in 1811, a follower of the Vilna of Gaon, and came to Jerusalem. But because he was an Ashkenazi Jew and there had been some kind of issue with borrowing money with other people, they had to disguise themselves as Fadim, because they wanted to live in Jerusalem. They were extremely religious, and they did. And eventually, he was a bit of a negotiator, diplomat, and he dealt with people like Rothschild and Montefiore. And in 1851, Arab, because they didn't want these people to come and live there, and he died. And his grandson is the famous Yom Moshe Salomon. So I don't live in Israel, but Israelis will tell you, oh, there are lots of songs about him. And he was the founder of Petach Tikva, of many other things that were at the printing press. And so there's a big family in Israel, I think 25,000 strong, called the Salomon family. So if you know the Israeli pharmaceutical company, Teva, they were founded by, I think his name was Eli Hurwitz. And so these are family dynasties that, if one can, link into, it's obviously what people like to do, being a family historian, is to connect. So there you go. So I live in Australia, far away from the action. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Oh. Okay, so we're just going to bring on Daniel as well. Let's get Daniel back here. Here we go.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes, definitely an amazing story. And I know that this is one or two of many that Eli has researched. And I would like just to point out, like, to all those people I'm seeing here commenting about founding Jewish ancestors just recently. You can see, like, Eli is in Australia, I'm in Israel, and people from all over the world are communicating now through internet, different forums, or even through these genealogy pages like Genie and MyHeritage. You should always definitely tell everybody about your story, about your questions. As Eli said, don't be shy, because you never know who is going to give you the key to build, to drop down that wall that you are facing.
Well, I just want to say one thing. My wife just walked in and she said to me, you left out that Avram Shlomo Zalman Tzoref was my third great-grandfather. You never told the people that that's your connection. Sorry. It's
you
actually
see,
in that first
that's
slide.
what happened when you deal with Jewish genealogy. We're all connected, and we need to tell everybody how we are connected, and that is the way to do it. Exactly.
Correct.
Okay, so I think we'll take some questions now from the audience. I'll bring the questions, and Eli or Daniel, whoever wants to take the question, you could just let me know. We have a few questions that we received throughout, and if you have questions, everyone in our audience, if you have more questions about Jewish genealogy in general, please let us know and put it in the chat now, and hopefully we can get to them. So we have a question here from Rhoda. And she says, I found my Jewish family. They were in London in 1804, but I don't know where they came before that. So how do I go further back?
Daniel?
Me? Okay. So probably, Rhoda, the one of the avenues that you can go is try to find out the language the people spoke. And if it was particular, like Germany or Lithuanian, you will know like where to go back. If you don't have documents, of course, that it will establish clearly where the birth or the marriage place where it is. Now, and I know over there a lot of people that will say, well, they were all speaking Yiddish, right, Ellie? No matter where in the world you are, if you speak Yiddish, you will find Jewish people out there. But it's very different, the words and the pronunciation, if you are speaking Hungarian Yiddish, Romanian Yiddish, or Polish Yiddish. So that can also give you a hint where your family is coming from. And finally, what I will suggest you is look at the history, because people almost never moved alone. They moved in groups. So your family probably came with other people for a particular reason. So if you can find out the history of migrations to England, to London in a particular time, that will definitely give you a hint. And I just remember that MyHeritage has a wonderful collection of newspapers, of Jewish newspapers from England. So why not give it a try? Maybe you will find your family also there. Ellie, do you have other suggestions?
Oh, well, I just know that people who came via the UK seem to have a better opportunity than people that came from other places, even directly from Europe, because there were complications, whereas in England, it seemed to be more orderly, things seemed to be recorded. And I think the other thing that you said about languages, I know my mother was born in Dvinsk, which is Daugavpils, which is Dinnerberg. I think it's more complicated in some respects in terms of the town names. In Lithuania, there's a place, of many places, but Plunyan, Plunga, I think it has 9 different names, okay? So that is the thing that you need to ask others, experts, whatever. Don't be shy. But my mother she didn't speak Latvian. They spoke Yiddish, okay? And Latvian was, I think, Lettish. They called it Lettish, but they also spoke Russian. So that was the other thing, is that there are definitely clues. And the sad thing is that today, with technology that we've got, in many cases we can't ask them anymore, unless we can bring them back from the dead. But I don't want to get into any controversial stuff. But the thing is that I think if there's a case somewhere and it's replicated somewhere else, that's what I found is good. Somebody's given me a clue, and they said, you know what, I've heard that kind of story before. So keep trying, don't give up. Don't give up.
So true, so true. We just received this story here from June. She said, sharing your story is so important. I just found a cousin who had a photo. I used a MyHeritage photo enhancer of a screen capture of the PDF, and it just gave me a happy dance feeling. I was the only grandchild of her daughter that she held before she died, and I was only 1 year old when she died. So just sharing, as you said, Eli, sharing with your friends, with family, with different people that you encounter on your journey, and that's how you can find out more information.
And photos are definitely very important as well. One of my branches is last name Singer, and it doesn't matter where I met with them, and they are all over in the US, in Canada, in England, or even here in Israel. They all had the same family photo from back Europe in Chernovitz in Ukraine. So if you have that picture, it means that you are related to me. That's the proof.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
We have a question here from Sharon. I think this is for you, Daniel. She asks, can a MyHeritage DNA test prove Jewish ancestors?
I will not think that any DNA test will prove ancestors unless you manage to use it as a tool to find the connection between you and the other person, because you may have DNA that seems like Jewish, but they are not necessarily Jewish. Remember that we're talking about genes and cultural and religious. It is true that the Jewish DNA, if I can call it like that, will stay among Jews because that is the use that, like, Jewish people tend to marry it among themselves, but you always have also people marrying into the Jewish culture. So it's not a proof; it's a tool that you can use. Like if you have 25 or 10% or even 6% of a DNA proven Ashkenazi Jew or Sephardic Jew, that will give you a hint that somebody up there in your family tree was related to the Jewish people. But you will need to do your genealogical research. You will need to build your family tree and to find the records.
Very interesting. I see a similar question from a different angle from Mandy, and we hear this quite often. She says there was some info that came through the family, I guess through the grapevine, that we have Jewish ancestors, but we haven't taken a DNA test yet. So I guess in some families, there may be rumors that someone in the family was Jewish, but they maybe don't have any information about the line. Where should they go from here? What should be their first step?
Well, definitely a DNA will be a good step, but in the meantime, while you wait for the results, try to get as many documents and try to build the family tree as detailed as possible. Try to contact people in those places if they are far away from you. For example, if I will discover someday that I will have some relative in Australia, I will call the Eli and I will ask him if he can help me finding those people over there. The local people will help you for sure. Genealogists are very helpful by nature, and probably Jewish genealogists are a little bit more than genealogists in general. Now, once you have your results, try to evaluate the common matches and try to determine if exists this Jewish component, if it's coming from your grandfather, your grandmother, the maternal line, the paternal line, and that will help you fine-tune the branch of the family that you should proceed and research more.
I've always got a story for something, and isn't it amazing that you find somebody from your family in Hungary coming to South Africa looking for a reconnection with their family, and they find it through Saul Isroff in London because he knows a lot of people, and the timing is always important. And so what happened was, the guy that came to South Africa, I wasn't even there, I'm in Australia, my wife and my cousins were in South Africa. He says, do you know we have other cousins in Turkey? So we said, no, we don't know anything about this. And it turns out the cousins in Turkey are from the same roots, Jewish roots, but they are modern day Muslims, because the women in the family were Jewish. So from a Jewish law point of view, they're halakhically Jewish, okay? The fathers were not Jewish, but they are Jewish. And so it's very interesting when you go to Turkey and then you discover the Jewish life in Turkey and how these people mix with Jewish people, and you didn't know their existence. So there's a broader world out there than just I don't believe in making a electronic connection I like invite me over for dinner. Let's see how good you can cook, all that kind of thing. So no matter, even if you're in Turkey, I'm on your doorstep.
Okay, great. Let's see. We have a question here from Marilyn. She says, my Jewish great-great-grandfather's surname was Lawrence and lived in London around 1810. He came to South Africa. One of his daughters was my grandmother. I would also like to know how he came to be in the UK and where he is originally from. Any advice?
Well, I think it's the same thing. That's why in Jewish Gen you also have subdivisions and specialists. So Litvak Sig is one, JRI Poland, which in itself is bigger than Jewish Gen, okay, in terms of their organization. So you mustn't forget to focus on the areas where you think there would be a specialty, in that kind of examination. So, and they all do connect. And as Daniel says, people are very helpful. I remember the first time I was looking for this family in Poland, Stanley Diamond, who runs JRI Poland, he's a Canadian man from Montreal. He's quite feisty. And he said, what's your Skype address? And he called me and we spoke for about a half an hour. And he says, now you're all on your own. I've given you the foot up, the leg start. So it's very important to connect with people from those territories. Same thing with Belarus. Belarus is a very difficult territory to try and examine. And there's a organization in England called the Together Plan, Deborah Brunner, and they work out of England to try and connect people with the Jewish community. But interesting enough, the lady who's the strongest lady there in Belarus itself is Tamara Vyshitskaya, who's not Jewish. And she has been an amazing person to connect with other people, for people in a remote area like Australia or anywhere else.
Eli, but correct me if I'm wrong, but here I think the historical surrounding is also important, because in 1800s and the early 1900s, there was commerce between the UK and the colonies and South Africa and Australia. So it was not strange to see people moving from one place to the other, try to find a better place and more sustainable life over there.
Yes.
So look at the historical surroundings and try to find the experts over there.
I don't know if you can see from my screen all the books on my table there. That's only some of them. I like collecting books. I don't always read all of them. But I found this book fascinating, From the Baltic to the Cape, by Ivan Kapelis, who lives in London, who's a lawyer, retired. And this book frames very, very well the path that the Litvaks took to get to South Africa. And it's an amazing story because it's true, number one, and it's how they got through ports like Memel, okay, which today is called Klaipeda. So I think in many respects, you also need to know your geography very well, because people often say, I get pained by when people say, they're somewhere from there in Russia. They always say it's Russia. Now, it was run by Russia, but it's not Russia.
Russia and Poland were the biggest countries in the history, right?
Yes. So you need to articulate, but if you can't, give out clues. There's often as you say, like the language, the way people spoke, their particular Yiddish. And I know in Jewish Gen, even if you send a photograph in or you send somebody some kind of clip, they can try and identify it. And I've found that people have had success with that. There are people that might not have success, but you could give it a go, as the Aussies say. Give it a try. You can't say, I can't find anybody. You just keep going until you find something.
On the contrary, I think we will have forever people that we will not find and that we will keep looking. Imagine how boring it will be if we find everybody in our family, right, Eli? And then there's no more questions and there's no more research.
Absolutely. The other thing I'd like to highlight are Yiscor books, because I think Yiscor books often have these stories. And, you find a name comes up. it may cost you a bit of money to get somebody to, well, these are often written in English now, but to try and translate something or other. But I found a lot of Jewish Gen have done a lot of work on various Yizkor books. This is the number 2 book already for Brest-Litovsk.
And
we
for
know
for those not familiar with that, Eli, Yizkor books is no other thing than memorial books that normally descendants from a particular town or a particular place, usually in Europe, but I think that we have it today all over the world as well, are putting together and publishing just to remember or remembrance not only the names of those people, but how people lived in those places and what people did, and maps about the exact places and where the location is today. And I myself have traveled through Romania and found a lot of very interesting pieces of my family research thanks to those memorial books.
You know, a bittersweet story with that is South Africa today is that a lot of the Litvaks came to the country towns. Okay, we call them dorps, and they never spoke English. In actual fact, they spoke Yiddish and they spoke Afrikaans because that was the language of the towns. And now today, where most people don't live there anymore, and of course have moved to the cities or migrated, that story is also going to get lost unless people document, which they're doing that now. So, so this is, and again, Rokishkas, you know, that's a huge undertaking. So it's, I got into this book because I took a photograph of a little memorial, and the same with this book. This is, you know, well, this is a famous town because of the Soloveitchiks, you know, the dynasty there, and the Briska Yeshiva, and that was my photo of terrible stuff of the Matseva. Or a collection of Matseva that were destroyed. Okay, and on the back you get like the amazing story of the King of Poland for a day. You know, the Katzenellenbogen story that they say is not particularly true, but it makes a nice story, and of course people connect with it. Okay, so the thing is that you want to feel connected and feel good.
Eli, are you telling us that our ancestors lied on those stories?
They didn't lie. But you know what?
They just bend the truth, right?
Yeah.
They made it more colorful.
Yeah. And you know, when you look at people like Menachem Begin, he came from Brest, okay? He's buried in Har HaTzaitim, correct? He's not buried in that's Mount of Olives, right? He's not buried in Mount Herzl. And if you've ever been to that cemetery, that's another experience. I think I enjoy the experience of traveling to the various little towns and finding out where the Jews lived, and also the cemeteries that obviously there are too many of them. Like in Lithuania, there are 200 Holocaust sites. But that's part of the history that you have to sort of go through and research.
Well, so, but if you need a tombstone in Israel, it's actually very easy to get because MyHeritage has photographed all the tombstones, and also we have it indexed them in Hebrew and English and any other language actually that you can search for it. In the search engine, you will find it. And we're moving through the world thanks to the Billion Graves app and the partnership that we have with them. So a lot of Jewish stones are also to be found on MyHeritage.
Yeah, the only danger with Har HaTzaitim, I'll just finish by saying you have to be very athletic when you want to visit the place, because
that's why I do it on the internet. It's much easier.
Like a good genealogist, always visiting the cemeteries, as we know. That's what Daniel likes to do on his family vacation. We'll just take one last question that we have here. We have a question here that I saw from, let's see, a question here from Lisa. And I find this is a very common issue for people with Jewish roots. She said, I have lots of Jewish DNA matches. I think that's a big problem for a lot of our Jewish users who just have many matches, many DNA matches. And she said, unfortunately, I have not been able to make the connection to family to date. How should I research? So how should, I don't know, Daniel, maybe you can tell us how can you attempt to wade through all these DNA matches? I know a lot of our Jewish users have even thousands of DNA matches.
One of the things we have not said yet about DNA, Jewish DNA, is that you need to take in account endogamy. I already mentioned that Jewish people intermarriage among themselves, meaning that whoever is detected as your third cousin, it may be not your third, but your fourth or your fifth cousin, meaning that you will have more DNA in common with the person than what really you should have. And this is because, again, some ancestors, 3 and 4 or even 5 generations back, intermarriage with the cousins and just kind of recycle the same DNA and gave you more DNA from that part of the family than what you should normally get. So take that into consideration and just work with patients through those DNA matches. As Ellie suggested, contact them and establish an interaction, ask them questions, see where you both are coming from. MyHeritage, if you have a family tree, and you should have a family tree when you're doing a DNA test, MyHeritage will detect common surnames and common places. Now, for example, if I will use Ukraine as the current place for my great-grandfather, and somebody will use Romania because that was the country where the city belonged to. Remember also that borders moved. So MyHeritage will not be able to establish the connection. The only way will be talking and communicating with the people and trying to just clear up this path that the DNA may be getting you much more close relative than what you really have.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think now we will give away our prize, a MyHeritage Complete Plan, the best plan we have to offer at MyHeritage. One lucky winner who has left us a comment will be winning this. As I said, it gives you unlimited access to 13 billion historical records, unlimited family tree size, access to our photo tools. So really an excellent prize. And our winner today is Linda Longnecker. And Linda wrote us and she said, I discovered I'm Ashkenazi Jewish. Since my test only 18 months ago, I have found my people. I was adopted at age 6 and had absolutely no idea who or where it came from. I have now met online my second cousin in the UK, and she has filled in the details of my missing life. Thanks all to MyHeritage. I now have the heritage. So
that's
really
amazing.
An amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Linda. And we will be in touch with you through private message to claim your prize. So thank you both for joining us and sharing your wisdom today. We really appreciate it, the information, the tips, the stories. Thank you both.
Sure.
Always a pleasure, always.
Yes.
And thank you to everyone in our audience for joining us today. We hope that you'll tune in for our next Facebook Live. We are offering these every week, so stay tuned to our blog, blog.myheritage.com, for more information about our upcoming Facebook Lives. And if you would like to rewatch this session or any of our previous sessions, just go to the videos section on our Facebook page, and you can watch them all there. So thank you, everyone, and we hope that you all have a great day.
Bye-bye, Ellie. Pleasure to see you.
Bye.